Have you ever been burned by a player so badly that you swore you would never draft them again? These are the 10 I am never going to draft in fantasy again. Let's start with a wide receiver who's only played 10 games since 2019. And since 2019, in the games he has actually played, he's only averaging 5.6 receptions and 60 yards per game. Enters this year age 30, which by no means is the kiss of death for a wide receiver, but it's certainly on the decline. And when we're talking about a player who's missed a lot of games over the last few years, you got to think the injury risk is even higher. Don't fall for wherever Michael Thomas ends up signing this year. It doesn't matter. It's over for Michael Thomas. Those days are gone. Do not draft him. From an old wide receiver to an old tight end, since 2020, he's only played 20 total games. In those games, he's only averaging 4 catches and 50 yards. He's going to be 31 this year, so certainly getting up there in age. He had a nice 2-year run a few years ago where he was an elite tight end, but the team he played on had no other viable pass catchers. He was the number 1, number 2, and number 3 targets. That is no longer the case because he's got Devontae Adams on the other side. I'm talking about Darren Waller. He's no longer elite. He no longer gets that elite target share, and he will no longer be on any of my fantasy teams. From an old wide receiver to an old tight end, back to an old wide receiver. This guy has only averaged 12.8 PPR points per game over the last 2 seasons. Only averaged 4 catches and 50 yards per game last year. Also, turning 30 this year in September. Not necessarily a free agent, but there's definitely talk that the Texans are going to move on from Brandon Cooks, whether that's releasing him or trading him. Either way, it doesn't matter. I don't care where he ends up. His best days are way behind him. I will not be drafting Brandon Cooks. All right, let's stick with wide receiver, but let's go to a younger wide receiver. It looks like this guy is going to be a one-hit wonder. If you take out his 2018 season, he's never topped 1,000 receiving yards, and he's only had more than 58 catches twice. The real problem for him is he's nothing more than a slot guy with a very limited route tree. He was just in the best possible situation in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes with no other wide receivers of real importance, and he still was very mediocre. If Juju Smith-Schuster can't get it done in KC, I don't know where he can go to get it done, but I don't care. He won't be on my teams. All right, now let's go to a quarterback where it seems like every single year people say he's good enough, he can get it done for you if you need him to, and he really hardly ever does. In standard scoring 4-point touchdown leagues last year, he got you less than 16 points in half of his games, and he only got you over 20 points twice. And that's despite the fact that he was playing with one of the best receivers in the entire NFL, also had one of the best running backs. He had the weapons around him. It didn't matter. Derek Carr was still bad. In fact, Derek Carr was so bad that he got benched for Jarrett Stidham. And he's so bad, he will not be on any of my fantasy teams. I don't care where he ends up this year. All right, let's go back to picking on running backs, and this is a young running back. Was drafted in the first round. A lot of people had very high expectations for him. But through 3 years so far, he's averaging less than 50 yards per game on the ground. And for a guy who was supposed to be an elite pass catcher coming out of college, is barely catching 2 passes per game. He's lost work to incredible running backs like Darrell Williams, Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon. It's probably never going to happen for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's talk they may trade him or try to trade him. I don't even care. Wherever he goes, he's not built to be a workhorse. He should have never been a first-round running back. He doesn't even have that elite pass-catching ability we were looking for. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, done on my fantasy teams. Let's go back to a wide receiver who was supposed to make a third-year breakout last year, was in a great situation, in a great offense. The team's clear. Number 2 wide receiver, had weekly, huge week-winning upside for your fantasy teams, and you got that week-winning upside once the whole season. And worse than that, in 9 of the 15 games he played, he got you single-digit PPR points. He ranks in the 36th percentile, and for those of you who don't know, that's bad, that's low, in every type of coverage, man, press, and zone. He's not a very good real-life wide receiver, but people got hooked into the Josh Allen narrative for Gabe Davis. They fell for the trap last year in the 4th, 5th round. I don't care how far he falls. I'm not falling for it in 2023. Let's go back to another first-round running back who actually has been very good when he's healthy, but that's the issue. He's never healthy. I don't like to put injury-prone labels on guys, but this guy truly is injury prone. In his 5 years in the NFL, he's only played 42 games. That's an average of 8 games per year. He's never played close to a full season, but people keep getting sucked into him when he is showing in training camp that he's healthy or when he's coming back from an injury. And they're going to get sucked into Rashad Penny again when he signs somewhere in free agency this year. But I won't, because I'm done drafting Rashad Penny. I've talked about some old players in here, but how about a 33-year-old wide receiver, hasn't topped 70 receptions or 750 yards in each of the last 2 seasons. Last year only averaged 42 yards per game despite being in one of the league's best passing offenses. There's a chance that Adam Thielen retires this year and then nobody has to worry about drafting him. But even if he doesn't, he's not worth a pick. The upside is completely gone for Adam Thielen. He may be complete dust at this point. Better just to avoid him. And then how about a tight end who only averages 2.6 catches and 31 yards for his career, but continually gets drafted as a top 10 tight end? Now, granted, he's been better the last 2 years, averaging a whopping 3.2 catches and 36.8 yards per game, but he keeps getting drafted for this tremendous touchdown upside that really isn't there. And another thing you have to really worry about is, will his team add some pass catchers? Because this team desperately needs pass catchers, and if they do, he's going to see even less work and even less chances to score. I'm talking about Dawson Knox. Stop drafting him as a top 10 tight end. You don't need to draft Dawson Knox at all, to be honest. So those are the 10 guys I've never drafted again, but to see the 10 guys I have to draft this year, check out this video right here.